all right?
Yeah, that's how I just heard you tap on that, so it's on. Alan,
Where's the pilot come back
just
from?
keep moving forward. Pay no attention to that last
You,
comment.
exactly. You're the only one that caught that, I'm sorry. That was my indoor thought. Ready? I'd like to bring this February 25th, 2016 Town Council and School Board Workshop to order. If you could join me to the little pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Paula, do we need roll call?
Sure. Councilor Albert?
Here.
Councilor Colby?
Here.
Councilor Ward?
Here.
Councilor McTevier?
Here.
Councilor Bickford and Kraft have been excused. Councilor Brunel is also excused.
Okay.
From the
At
school
this ti-
department, shall we take attendance? Tracy Austin?
Here.
Paula Jeffries?
Here.
Gina Mason? Pete Reed? Kathy Jurgen?
Here.
Rick Green?
Here.
And Haley McCrader?
Here.
Okay.
At this time, I'll turn it over to our town manager.
I'm just going to introduce Greg Shabbat. He's with RHR Smith, and this is the first year that they have done the audit, and he has been the lead person on this audit for the school and for the town. And I'm going to turn it over to him, and he's going to walk us through the audit.
So thanks for having me, and I got to say I love this approach of getting everyone in the same room, and not just because it saves me a trip, but I think it works a lot better. And please feel free as we're going through to ask any questions as we go through. The audit has been completed. We're the auditors for both the town and the school. The school has separately issued financial statements. The towns, unfortunately, were just distributed, as you know, tonight. So if later on, as you have time to go through the 100 and whatever pages, if you have questions later on, we work for you. So use us anytime for questions. We like communication throughout the year. We feel that it helps. This process is good, getting together to review the results, but communication throughout the year helps too. Our job as auditors is to issue an opinion on your financial statements, and that opinion had a modification in it. Now it's, rather than qualified or unqualified, it's called a modified or unmodified opinion. Your opinion has one modification, and that is that the water department, which is part of the town, a department of the town, is not included in your financial statements. And the reason for that is it's a different year end. It's a December year end, and that may be revisited in the future. There's different ways to do it. It can be presented as a 12/31, even though the rest of the town accounts are on a June 30, or you can just have the modification, which many people like yourselves do. Other than that, there were no departures from generally accepted accounting principles, so you had an unmodified opinion on everything else, or a clean opinion, and that applies to both the town and the school. And I like to think of it as there's really three components to the audit. Besides auditing the numbers and amounts and disclosures in your assets and liabilities that are included in your financial statements, on an annual basis we review your internal control systems, things like cash receipting, cash disbursements, payroll, those type of transactions. We also review how you process adjusting journal entries. We look at decentralized cash locations, which sometimes, even though the dollar amounts may be small, and I'll use the example, student activity funds, the risk is higher. So our approach, and every auditor's approach, is to focus on risk, not just the size of the dollars. The last thing you want is Lisbon's name on the front page of the paper for something happening, and we see it far too often. So that being said, we do on a rotating basis and on a risk basis review your internal controls, and as a result of that review, we would be required to report in writing to you as the oversight body anything that we deem to be significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in internal controls. And there were two that we deemed to be significant deficiencies that I'll talk about after we talk about the financial results. So there's the financial, there's the internal controls, and then in your case, because you spend over $500,000 in federal dollars, you have what's called a single audit, or a compliance audit, where we select certain of your federal grant programs, which oftentimes are at the school. In this case, there were 2 at the school, Title I and local entitlement, and 1 at the town, which was highway planning and construction. And we review your compliance with certain compliance elements that the feds tell us that they want tested. And the result of that test this year was that there were no compliance findings on your administration of federal grants. So that's something to be proud of. That means that for those programs anyway, and we also, if anything came to our attention in any other program, we'd bring that to your attention as a finding. There were no such findings. So that's the compliance piece of it. For the financial statement piece of it, we find it easier to kind of go through some graphs rather than just flip through financial statements and everyone's eyes are crossing, including mine. So, but I'll try to reference as I go through what part of the financial statements you can get more detail in, because what we'll go through is kind of in summary fashion. So actually, if we just flip to the first page, and the focus of these graphs is on your general fund, your general operating fund. Obviously, you have many special revenue and capital projects and permanent and trust funds, things like that, in the financial statements that are all disclosed in detail in the exhibits in the financial statements. But first is a comparison of budget to actual for your general fund revenues. And you can see that property taxes exceeded budget estimates by $284,000. That was the result of the way that property tax revenue is recognized, in that you can recognize as revenue anything that's been collected within 60 days after year end. So every year, annually, there's an adjustment, generally during the audit process, to adjust that deferred revenue account, it's called, and that affects how much property taxes you can recognize. So your collections were slightly better, and you collected more in that 60-day period. And I will note that part of that is an effort by the town this past year to aggressively clean up, and I know you folks had something to do with that, to clean up some of the old both personal property tax accounts and lien accounts. So that has a big impact, because it's either been collected or it's off the books. Either way, it affects that number. So I commend you for those efforts. Excise tax on a budget of $1.28 million came in at $160,000 over budget. Licenses and permits, $10,000 over budget. Intergovernmental revenues, things like state revenue sharing, BETE, and that also includes the biggest chunk of that would be state revenue for education. And all in all, that came in $140,000 over budget. And then you can see the other categories there. The only one that was under budget, which is kind of a hodgepodge of things, was other income. So all in all, your budgeted revenues on a budget of about $23 million came in, and obviously that includes town and school, came in $604,000 better than budget. So all things being equal, that would increase your year-end fund balance. And you had a utilization of surplus towards towards the budget year that we're in now in the school department of about $258,000. That was a reduction of fund balance, and you can see there were budgeted transfers to I think that's all school lunch, and then in your case you have various carry forward accounts, reserve accounts that are accounted for in your general fund but aren't budgeted amounts. They're just they're carried forward from year to year as ongoing projects or sometimes new projects. So we reflect those separate from the budgeted revenue, so it doesn't skew the budget results. So there was another $762,000. So all those things together meant that you added to fund balance about $1.1 million. So. Is that me? So if you want to make a note, if you look at Schedule A, which appears on page 63 in the financial statements, that has a more detailed breakdown of all the revenue accounts, and something that I think is new in your financial statements this year is that we separated it into two separate sections, one for town and one for school, and then with a combined total column. So there, that was page 63, Schedule A. So that's where that detailed breakdown shows up. So on the next page of the graphs, page 3, is a similar comparison of general fund expenditures. And the detail for this it starts on page 64. Again, a budget to actual broken down by town and school. So just going down through the categories, general government was under budget by $262,000, public safety $126,000, public works $68,000, and these are at the level of departmental control, and you can see that all of your budgeted lines, except for debt service, which I think was just a interest item, were under budget. The overlay and abatements, that line gets combined together, even though the abatements aren't really budgeted overlay isn't really budgeted to cover abatements, but for financial statement presentation, it often gets shown that way. And the unclassified line, $201,416, was a note receivable that the town had on the books that we'll talk about when we get to the management letter as well. But that was, more research needs to be done on that, and the best information we were able to glean, we thought it better to establish an allowance for doubtful accounts for that note receivable until more information can be gathered on the collectability of that loan. So it's a conservative approach. It hadn't been done in the past, and we just, along with management, felt it was the conservative way to handle that. So it's still on the books and being tracked and being investigated, but but you kind of took the hit for that in this year's financial statements. So and one more thing, the education line, all in all, on a budget of about $15 million, education came in under budget by about $269,000, and the best, the greatest detail will be in the school's financial statements, but in the town's financial statements on page 65 is a budget to actual breakdown based on the 11 budgetary lines, and you can see that all categories, regular instruction, special education, other instruction, student staff support, etc., all categories were under budget, totaling a positive budget variance of $269,000. So all in all, your expenditures came in under budget by about $503,000, 269 of that being education, the rest being town, and that includes the write-off of the bad debts, and then deduct expenditures in those reserve accounts, which again aren't budgeted but ongoing projects, and some transfers out to other funds, comes to a net, and that transfer, I believe, was the education transfer to the capital reserve, yeah, which is a calculated amount. So all in all, expenditures after the expenditures in the reserve accounts would have reduced your fund balance by $912,000. All of it, more than all of it, being in the reserve accounts, not in the unassigned, which we'll talk about in a minute. So I'm not going to spend time going through changes in assets and liabilities necessarily from year to year, but the net effect of that is your fund balance or your equity position. And that equity is broken down into several categories. The first being, so I went back 4 years to give you a good comparison of where those amounts have been and where they're going. Non-spendable is, in your case, well, in general, it's amounts that aren't in spendable form, things like inventory and notes receivable. In your case, it's all, I think all consists of notes receivable, which are spendable once they are collected, but not spendable when they're in receivable form, especially the long-term portion of it. So you can see the large reduction from 245,000 down to 29,000 was the write-off of that note receivable that we talked about, or the establish of the allowance. And if you want to make a note that the best place to see that is Statement C, which is on page 20, which lists not only your general fund, but all of your other various funds of the town. So the next category of fund balance, again accounted for within the general fund, is restricted for the school department, because that's restricted for education, obviously, by law. So that went down from 417,452 to 351,389. However, that was budgeted to go down by 257,000. So you came in better on revenues and better on expenditures, and it was offset by the utilization of the budgeted utilization of fund balance. So rather than decreasing by 258,000 as expected, if everything came in exactly on budget, it only decreased by 66,000. The next category is assigned fund balance, which is made up of two components. One is your ongoing carry forward accounts, which I think are approved every year by council. So you're aware of those. And then when it applies, any amounts assigned towards the subsequent year budget, if anything has been utilized from unassigned and moved over to assigned to reduce the impacts of the budget. And then what's left over is unassigned, town. And you can see that unassigned went up quite a bit, from about $1,646,000 to $2,242,000. In total, your fund balance increased by $196,636 from $3,050,000 to $3,246,63. That includes the school fund balance of $351,381. So the town fund balance in total increased by $262,699. And we'll explain the large increase in the unassigned and what that all means. So the next page, page 5, and I'm always trying to find the best way to help explain the changes in fund balance, and that's why I started with the budgeted revenues and budgeted expenditures. So if your revenues came in exactly on budget and your expenditures exactly on budget, and you didn't utilize any fund balance, then you'd be at the same place you were last year. So the way to explain it is by those positive and negative variances and anything else that was charged directly to fund balance. So your revenues came in better than budget by $594,615, so that added to fund balance. And here we're talking about only, I took out the impact of all the other categories, so the revenues in the reserves and the expenditures in the reserves and the write-off of the note receivable, because that impacts the other categories of fund balance, not unassigned. So these are just the impacts on unassigned to show you how you got from last year's number to this year's number. So positive revenue variance is $594,615. positive expenditure variances, and if you were trying to tie that back to the schedules we just looked at, you just add back the bad debt to get to that number. And that's only for the town expenditures as well, because the school is separate. So another addition of $435,285 by the town budgeted accounts coming in better than budget. As loans are repaid, that amount moves from the category of non-spendable into the unassigned category, so that added another about $15,000. And then as new carry-forwards are created and approved by council, that moves that from the category of unassigned over to assigned, so that was about another $167,000 that reduced unassigned. And then, as part of the audit, it was noted that the amount that had been approved for carry forwards was different than the amount that was reported in the financial statements. It didn't impact your total fund balance, it just impacted between the categories. So with that restatement between the categories, in other words, unassigned last year, we believe was overstated by $281,000, and assigned was understated by $281,000. So moving that back into the correct categories means an increase in unassigned fund balance of $596, added to last year's amount equals the ending unassigned of $2,242,429. I thought, Ed, I had done some calculations of percentage. Did I send, or the,
But that's okay.
That's positive.
okay,
You have one question on the,
Those the negatives?
fund balance.
yep,
We're looking at primarily town's financial statements. We're looking at what is non-spendable, restricted, assigned, and unassigned, not having the benefit of these schools' financials, the $351,000. How does that work?
say that again, the
351, which
Yep.
is restricted to the school department, becomes
Oh.
their fund balance.
yep,
How is that
broken down further.
How much?
Oh, that's what, I don't have the amount that was utilized towards the FY16 budget. Do you remember?
190 something.
190 something, so
About 194,000.
that sounds right. So yeah, that reduces the 351 to become their unassigned. It all gets shown as restricted, and I'm sorry if I misunderstood early, but that becomes restricted in the schools, but it's all restricted in yours.
So we will get a detailed copy of the school's financials as well?
Yes. Yeah. So the last graph is I went back as far as I had information for, but back to from 2007 to 2015, you can see this is total fund balance, all the categories. The town ended the year at, or back in 2007, it was about 3.5 million, and this year it's about 3,246,000. And you can see it's stayed, fairly consistent, a couple of spikes and a couple of dips as the town, used fund balance from time to time to help balance the budget. And maybe by the end I'll have some percentages, because the unassigned is often measured as a percentage of budget, and industry standards often recommend a month to 2 months of expenditures. Yours is in solid financial shape as far as your unassigned balance, but I'll see if I can get those percentages. Are they in the MD&A?
No,
No.
but we're at about 9.5%.
Yeah.
Recommended is about 17%.
Yeah, we-
ASB 54 has been.
Yeah, the one month of expenditures would be 8.33, 2 months 16.67. the 1 month of expenditures is considered fairly low. You're in that range, but you're on the low end of that range at 9-point-something%. And the industry standards seem to be moving more towards that 2 months of expenditures. The GASB and the GFOA are recommending that. So while it's within acceptable ranges, it's not what the industry is currently kind of recommending. Are there any questions on the financial pieces of it? And I know you haven't had.
Statistics on peers?
I'm sorry?
Are there any statistics on peers, how they fare on those?
I can get some of those to you.
I'd be curious to see in
Yep.
that regard, because
I'll send those to Ed, and he can.
it's a vicious cycle associated, starting with the state demonizing the local municipalities for the funding, trying to actually get this to actually play out with school funding. And it's one thing to say that we should have 2 months' worth of reserves at 16 and 7%. With all the budgetary pressures, is that a reality?
Yeah, for a lot of folks it is.
So I'd like to know what our peers are, if we could.
Yeah, and I'll get that information, because I have presented that in a couple of cases.
Perfect, that'd be great, Greg. Just
And I'll get
food for
that to,
thought.
yep.
You know, are we on the high end of our peers or the low end, so we can at least benchmark ourselves?
I would say, just off the top of my head, you're in the range. I mean, some of our clients have a 25% fund balance. That's at the point where
You got
you
too
ha-
much.
you have taxpayer groups and others saying, okay, we're overtaxed.
You're gouging.
And in this, I mean, the budget environment has been
Could have worse
very
policy.
difficult for at least 10 years, if not more. And so a lot of those places that used to have that kind of fund balance just don't have it anymore. Every year there's more and more pressure. And all the easy stuff has been done, as you know better than I do. So,
Right,
but yeah, I'll get you that
appreciate
information.
it. Thank you, Greg.
Sure. So the next piece, unless there's anything else you want to discuss about the financial pieces or any questions, knowing that you haven't had the opportunity to go through the financial statements. I'm sure you'll all do so tonight, line by line. So let me move on to the internal control piece, and I'll refer you to towards the back of the financial statements. On page 78. So we also issue, in addition to the opinion, a report on government, in accordance with government auditing standards, which you're required to have because of the federal money that you spend, hand in hand with the single audit. The compliance audit goes, a yellow book audit it's called, and accountants aren't very creative. It's because the book is yellow. If they ever changed the color, we wouldn't know what to do. But the internal control deficiencies are broken down into a couple categories: significant deficiencies, the worst being significant deficiencies that are considered material weaknesses. These are two that we consider significant deficiencies, and I kind of hate the terminology. It used to be called reportable conditions, which sounded a little softer. Significant deficiencies sounds horrible, but it's not uncommon to have these in an entity your size. But I don't want to diminish the importance of it, but I also don't want to scare you with the terminology. And some of this is somewhat subjective too. The first significant deficiency that's reported is a general comment about reconciliations on a monthly or timely basis of all of your asset and liability accounts and analytical reviews of your revenues and expenditures. And this is something that a lot of this had been put in place when we started doing the audit, and some things had been discovered as a result of these reconciliation processes being put in place. But for the year being audited, obviously that condition was in place. And these are things that aren't going to be resolved overnight. These are ongoing processes that, that the town will put in place over time, and as I said, some of that some effort has already been made, and as I'll discuss in another comment, the more these processes are written, the better off you are, and the easier it is to, as personnel changes and whatnot. But what we're recommending is ongoing reconciliations, preferably at least monthly, of cash, taxes and liens receivable, other accounts receivable, payroll liabilities, state payables, and other accounts payable. So some of these things needed some cleanup before the audit was able to start, and some of these things were brought to our attention as part of the audit as well. So I think as I go through, if Ed and Diane don't mind, that included in all these are management responses, whether management agrees or disagrees, and what their resolution is. So I'll let Ed respond to these as we go through.
Well, certainly, as Greg has pointed out, not all the accounts of the town have been reconciled on a regular basis. Certainly, when I came in April, I was already behind the 8 ball, so to speak, several months. And as I continued to dig in and try to get the accounts in shape, what I found were, I guess, true-ups instead of real reconciliations. We did have to bring in an outside accountant to help us catch up primarily on the cash. I'm hoping that this year we'll be in a better place. Looking forward to bringing in a new accounting system. However, the process will extend over probably 15 months, and we're going to do the best we can as far as keeping things up to date and reconciled. It's about as much as we can do.
So the next and last comment that was deemed to be a significant deficiency is when there's so much going on at the town and so decentralized activities and everything flows through the town, it becomes increasingly important to have consistent systems in place to account for things like cash receipts and disbursements, and the same criteria for all departments. Well, it can be different criteria depending on the situation, but at least somewhat uniform criteria and requirements. So things like activities at the school department and the water department that flow through the town, we recommend that procedures be developed to ensure that all these things are substantiated, appropriate, and authorized, and specifically on cash receipting, having proper receipts and documentation deposited on a timely basis. Cash dispersed outside the finance office should have proper authorization, documentation, and be valid expenses. And the reporting requirements that require 1099s, which sometimes that becomes cumbersome when you have multiple departments and you're paying the same vendors, so it becomes important to track that carefully. Reporting, any departments that maintain separate accounts should submit monthly to the finance office, and the same is true within the school department. Sometimes they have activity funds that are or trust funds, things like that are outside of the business office. So it becomes important to have control of those through the business office, at least by reviewing bank statements and reconciliations and things like that. So I'll let.
You tested ours, though, right?
Yeah, we tested the activity fund, all of the activity funds, I think. So, which we tend to do on an annual basis, just because of what I said earlier about the risk. So we've seen it too many times. It's not that there are bad people, it's just it's a risky area when you have one person or two people controlling cash like that.
yes, there's no disagreement on our part. As you can see by the response, we do agree. I agree that we should have an internal control manual and that it should be consistent with the COSO framework. The town has 3 significant operations going, one being general government, which encompasses obviously police, fire protection, public works, tax collection, finance, town manager, council operations, to name a few, library, and the other public service being parks and recreation. I believe strongly that there should be a uniform set of operating controls and internal controls that are consistent amongst and throughout all of the departments, which I think would make for a lot smoother operation and put uniform standards across the town for financial operations. Again, this is a process that is long-term. There are several steps that you really should go through. One, risk assessment, understand what you're looking at for current operations, and then design, where necessary, of better procedures. So again, this is another long-term project for the town.
So that's all there was for significant deficiencies, either at the town or the school, but from time to time, we come across things that we feel warrant your attention, that could better improve efficiencies or effectiveness, and those can be either in writing or not. We prefer that they be in writing so that you can see them as elected officials. So we issue a management letter, which is addressed to management, but obviously a public document that, and we can discuss that as well. And again, these didn't, in our estimation, rise to the level of.
Before you move forward, Greg,
Yep.
one of the comments on the reporting, activities that are not part of the town use and tax TIN number, did you find any occurrence of that? It just caught my eye, because
You know what, I'll have to look. We sent out blanket bank confirmations to all the local banks, and what we're often looking for is bank accounts that are using the town or the school's ID number that aren't known by the town or controlled by the town. And I don't, the water department, is that the only, do you remember if we discuss it? I do have those confirmations, but I may have to get back to you, and I'm sorry I can't remember.
oh, that's
but
fine, it's,
sometimes there's booster accounts, there's recreation accounts
right,
that
but
just get set up.
That's where I was going down that line, is somebody not having the tax umbrella for that, they don't understand that it is the town's TIN number for a reason, it isn't Joe individuals.
Right, and what we, it's critical that the town at least know who's using it. It
Right.
isn't that no
So
one
where-
can
so
use
where is
it.
that?
It's that you
That's
need
a
to
number
know
for a
about
reason.
It's you need to know and have some control, either by asking them for monthly
Right.
or quarterly financials, or at least review their bank statements. So that's one thing that we look at carefully, and I'll have to get, I don't think it was chronic.
If it didn't stick in your mind,
Yeah.
I'm hearing no, but I would appreciate the answer on that.
Yep, I'll get back to you on that. So, as far as the management letter,
Thank you.
there was an item noted relating to payroll withholdings, and specifically main PERS on the town side, that dates back to 2013. And it was a result of an error due to an incorrect deduction setting in the town's payroll software. So the town notified main PERS, and this is something that was brought to our attention, not something that we discovered as part of the audit. And it was discovered, I believe, when some of those reconciliation processes were put into place in reconciling payroll withholding accounts and things like that, which obviously we're recommending continue. So main PERS has been notified, and our recommendation would be that ongoing reconciliations be performed of these various withholding and state and Maine PERS accounts, and included in the policies and procedures that are developed and submitted to the council for approval. So I'll let Ed respond to that if he wants to.
Well, this does go back several years, predates all of us. It really came to light again in the spring of last year when I first came on board. Current payroll person came down to me and said that it appeared to be that the main PERS account was not in reconciliation. I took a look at it and agreed that it wasn't in reconciliation, and at that time explained that I just had too much on my plate. Diane picked it up later on as I won't say the gap widened, but it became more acute as far as coming to our attention. And actually it was Diane that discovered that this went back to 2013, where we had an employee who had signed up for Maine State Retirement, but the contributions were never made, and the then payroll person, I guess, just did not properly reconcile the account, and so it was a chronic issue. But it is fixed. We do reconcile our payroll accounts on a regular basis now.
By fixed, you mean the employees paid it back? By fixed, you mean the employees paid it back?
No.
No, we didn't transmit.
We didn't transmit.
We didn't transmit, okay.
We
That's-
collected
that's-
it from the
that's-
employee, but we never transmitted
Okay.
their portion
that-
or the
that's
town's
easier of the
portion.
two. That's the easier.
Which is-
When you've got somebody you're
Yeah.
trying to put in a collection basis 2
that's
years after the
right.
fact.
Yep.
Yeah. I've seen the other side too, so
Not good,
I
is
don't
it?
want to be there.
No.
Neither options are good, but
No.
you're right, that's, if you had to pick. The next comment is one that we are often looking very carefully at when the school department is a department of the town. It's obviously different if you're cutting 12 monthly checks to an RSU, but when the school is a department of the town and gets recorded on the town's books in summary fashion, it's critical to have a reconciliation process in place so that the towns and schools' books reconcile. And it's important that that be done on an ongoing basis, at least monthly, so that any discrepancies can be picked up right away. It's very cumbersome, and we see it all the time, where if you wait till the end of the year, it can be a great deal of work to do that. And at the time of the audit, there was some of that work that was necessary in order to finish that reconciliation with the town and the school. So I'll be working with both the town and the school in any way that they'd like me to assist in that process. And again, it's not that there aren't any processes in place. We're just recommending that that be looked at and improved as necessary. And so this is a comment. We also issued a separate management letter to the school department. So this particular comment was reported in both the towns and the schools, the same comment. And while I'm on that, since I don't have it in front of me, there was an additional comment on the school side regarding general ledger cleanup. And what that entails is sometimes over time, as funds get created and then go away, there's some cleanup necessary, especially in the due to from accounts between the grant funds and the general fund and things like that. So that's something that I've already, Haley and I have already talked about, and I'll be assisting in that effort to just streamline the accounts. It's not that there were any errors necessarily. It's just a matter of cleaning things up and improving the reporting within the individual funds, and I think it'll make it a lot easier for Haley and others on the school side once that's complete.
Again, as you can see from the management's response, the auditor's findings are in fact accurate. focusing on the corrective action plan even before the audit had started. I started working with our bank to begin to separate school department money from town money as one part of developing some segregation and better accountability over the funds. I think there are a number of policy issues here that probably need to be addressed by the legislative body of the town as to how we work together rather than continuing to operate in kind of a silo manner.
So the next one is something else that we always look for is old outstanding checks, and that is on your bank reconciliation, checks that haven't cleared after a period of time. In particular, we look at things over 120 days old, and you know, besides becoming a nuisance on the payroll on the cash reconciliations, because you have to deal with them month after month, there is a process required by the state to turn those items after efforts. There's a process that you go through, make some efforts, and then turn them over to the unclaimed property division. Some of Ed's old friends at the state who are always looking for money. So that's something that should be monitored regularly and done in accordance with those guidelines.
There is no disagreement with the auditor's comments through our response. Again, one of the challenges that I immediately faced as we tried to reconcile cash accurately was that the accounting system had never been reconciled and contained outstanding checks that went back to the beginning of the implementation of the TRIO system. I had to clean out checks through 2009, 2012, just remove them from the register. Now working through outstanding checks in the system in 2013 and 2014 to really get down to an accurate evaluation as to how many outstanding checks that are old and aged that we should transmit to the Treasurer of State. So this is an ongoing issue that I'm working on.
The next one is on record retention.
So we have a real set of outstanding checks now. What I'm hearing is the fact is it's determination what needs to go to the state and what would actually be current.
Yes, we came a long way through the summer as far as trying to get an accurate picture as to what might be outstanding.
Okay.
So you have to figure we're dealing with a universe of all the checks that were issued from 2010 up through the summer. And I am working.
How did they get past the prior auditor? I hate, you know what I mean?
I don't think we want to look backwards. I don't think we want to be in a situation where we're trying to assess blame.
I agree, but it's, I'm looking at it. Agreed.
Sounds like a lot of
need to
checks,
move
though.
forward, but it seems like an open issue in that regard.
It is an open issue, but I'd rather be looking at it as a prospective type of thing as to everything I'm trying to focus on here is let's move ahead, let's move forward, and let's try to do it better. And so as we talk about some of these things being long-term, as far as cleanup, they are going to be long-term because I don't want to be in a position where I just do a quick true-up and move ahead. I want to be able to say I've examined it, I've reconciled it the best I can, and now we'll move ahead. I was at the point in the spring that I was thinking I might want to let our general operating account just kind of trail off and bring up a new checking account for general operations to
Close the
really
account and
get
start again.
a handle. And I'm not finished with that discussion. I'm meeting with our bank next week to talk about what we can do in the interim as far as better management of our cash and our checking accounts.
Okay.
So I think that'll be a good discussion and take us a long way down the road.
Thank you, sir.
The next item that we noted was records retention of old check stock, and the fact that the record retention guidelines hadn't been adhered to necessarily as far as destruction of old checks. So we're recommending that those guidelines be reviewed and to ensure that the town's in compliance with those.
I don't disagree. The first office that I was located in opened up a file cabinet drawer and found some old check stock. And then, interestingly enough, as I moved to a different office and opened a file cabinet in that office, I found more unused and old check stock. And you have to understand today, check stock is pretty much a blank piece of paper with, you know, some embossing on it. These were all pre-numbered, pre-coded,
A liability.
magnetic.
A liability.
Yeah. So we're going to have a ceremony and either shred them or burn them.
Am I invited?
You will be there to the account.
Excellent.
Witnesses are always good for that.
Yes.
I'll bring the marshmallows.
Yeah.
The next item is lack of financial software utilization. There are often times where separate spreadsheets and other functions are used where the software could accomplish the same task. Again, this is not unusual. This is things like performing the cash reconciliations, accounting for fixed assets, other reconciliations that the town could either utilize its existing software or we don't make specific recommendations on whether you should get new software, but I know that the town has looked at Munis, which a lot of our larger clients are utilizing and has a lot of capability. So whether it's determining that the existing software can be utilized for these functions like cash reconciliations and fixed assets, or if new software needs to be purchased, we're recommending that process be done.
All I will say is thank you to those of you on the council who supported our request. We are just about finishing up our negotiations with Tyler Technology. I think we are at the point where the contract looks very good for the town. I'm hoping to have a signing ceremony next week, and in April we'll be kicking off.
So that's news to me. I didn't realize you were so far along, but it is a good software package.
If I communicate with ours.
It will. Same company, yep. Yeah, they do a good job, actually. It's common, a lot of the
We
schools,
talked about doing it a long time ago.
yeah, the schools love ADS and the towns love Munis, so it's not uncommon. And they'll work closely with you to do that. The next one is organization of general ledger accounts, and this is somewhat similar to what I brought up about the school department and organizing the general ledger better and kind of cleaning things up. The town has multiple funds and activities that it accounts for. Over time, things can get kind of out of whack or not as streamlined as they started out being. And so this is actually a perfect time to look at that if the town does go to new software to clean up that, because you kind of get a fresh slate and clean start. So it's a perfect time to look at all the various accounts, how things are accounted for, what funds should be there and what funds can go away, that type of thing. So this could work hand in hand with the previous discussion.
Agreed. All I need to say is that the general ledger of the town has been in a somewhat disorganized state for several years and is very unwieldy to work with.
The next comment sort of relates to something we talked about earlier with the decentralized cash collection locations and all the various activities that flow through the town that sometimes are initiated outside of town hall or the school business office. And that is fiscal control and administration of grants. From time to time, public safety, public works, other departments may apply for and get various grants through the state or federal governments, and I don't think we noted anything specific where the finance department was unaware of anything that was going on outside the town office, but there should be a process where everything does get initiated, or at least become known so it can be accounted for properly at the town, rather than being done at these outlying areas in the various departments of the town. So we're, I think, in your efforts to do written policies and procedures, this would be a good area to address in that process.
Now, we do have a policy where any grants that are applied for, they're filling out an application, has to be approved by the school committee. So is that the type of control that you're talking about, rather than anyone just applying on behalf of the town?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is the towns, not the schools.
This is the town's one.
We do have a policy if you'd like to adopt it.
Somebody's already asked for it.
Works good.
So on the town side, it is not so much approval by the council for our operation as it is consistent record keeping, centralization of the record keeping, and being aware of the process from pre-award all the way through the compliance. Had a lot of difficulty putting together the federal grant information for the last audit. So we're setting up what I'll call at this point Fund 15, which we will use to account for federal grants and pass-throughs from the state.
And as Tracy mentioned, we do the same thing on the town side. Everything has to go to council first before we can apply for it. They have to give us approval and acceptance.
A lot of times what you find is that it's not so much the income coming through, it's the expenditure, what the purpose of the grant was,
What's intended.
utilization. That's where the record keeping, to Ed speaking, is it wasn't in, a lot of grants are written, the fact that you can't include fringe, or you can't do certain things with those funds, when you're not demonstrating what federal funds are being done, it gets real dicey real quick.
Right. And you can endanger your compliance with those grants if
Forfeiture of next.
and some of that stuff, those requirements that Alan's talking about, it can be very, difficult to understand for people that aren't used to dealing with that stuff on a daily basis. So it's important that people, in the centralized office, have a handle on all that.
By having these controls in place, it's less likely that we'll fall out of compliance, I guess.
Correct.
On that.
Yeah, and falling out of compliance can mean the loss of funds.
Exactly.
Yeah. Not a good scenario. So we've mentioned this, but internal control policies and procedures manual, there are some written policies and procedures. A lot of this is a matter of centralizing these procedures, adding to the procedures, modifying where necessary, getting the procedures approved, and in a centralized basis. And Ed mentioned COSO. There is an internal control framework that provides some guidance on this, and any policies and procedures should keep that framework in mind. So a lot of this stuff has been done. Obviously needs to be tailored to your needs and the needs of the town. But we just recommend that those things be pulled together and approved by the town council once they're completed.
Agreed.
The note receivable we talked about earlier, that was a case where during the audit we were unable to satisfy ourselves, and Diane and Ed unable to satisfy themselves about the collectability of, oh, okay. And it's not that the loan is necessarily uncollectible, it's just a matter of research, and so, to be conservative, determined that allowance was necessary to be reported.
So Tracy Stube, our Economic Development Director, went through boxes of material, and she was able to put together a spreadsheet and a copy of the original note and contract, and that has all been turned over to the town attorney. And I will forward you a copy of everything.
Management of non-sufficient funds checks. There was an inconsistency, we felt, in the way that these were accounted for, adjustments being done in the town's accounts, and I think this was sort of discovered jointly with Ed during the process of, as he mentioned, catching up on all these cash reconciliations, and these were some of the things that came up as part of that process, and create those reconciling items each month that need to be addressed. And we did become aware that subsequent to the year being audited, the town has taken a very aggressive approach to dealing with and following up on the NSF check. So I think this is an area that we'll obviously look at as part of next year's audit, but has gone a long way towards being addressed already.
Thank you. Several years ago, the town had a really good procedure in place for chasing checks that we received that did not have the funds to back them up. And then at some point decided to go to an outside vendor. I think primarily because of the time it takes to make the phone calls, do the follow-up. It's really a heavy lifting chore. Again, as the insufficient funds checks became more and more of an issue, and we began to see more and more of them come in over the last several months, Diane was insistent that we take it back in-house and manage it. So sat down with my staff, was fortunate to discover that the person who had managed it in the past was still part of the group. The individual volunteered to take it over. We notified the vendor that we were going to take the management of these checks back in-house. And since, I would say, late summer, we have been able to collect, I would say, about 90% of the checks that go back as far as 2013, and have made a really good effort with good results to collect the more current checks. There will always be those checks that you cannot collect, and when we've run out of softball types of encouragement, we now turn them over to law enforcement to deal with in a more formal way, and I think it's really paid off. I think the vendor actually got kind of lazy on us on the old checks.
And if you come in and do any business out at the front office now and pay with a check, you're going to be required to show your driver's license. And that's all part of the process for turning it over to the police department.
Going old school, I love it. I'm gonna do the Simple T account.
Yeah.
The next one is something that fortunately we as auditors didn't have to deal a lot with, because it had already been kind of resolved by June 30th, 2015, and that is the town's self-insured health care plan, which I'm sure some of you are very familiar with. The comment that we had was in transitioning to a new health care plan, not self-insured, the reserves that were carried over were insufficient to cover the claims that were being cleared after year end, so we didn't note that. And we see this on occasion, self-insured healthcare plans, and I won't get into it too much because, you know, it can be a sensitive area, but I'll speak personally. I just don't recommend that the town go down that road because it exposes the town to a risk management function that maybe you're not as geared to as.
Not prepared for when you can't spread it over a larger number of employees.
Right, so,
Enough said, move on.
okay, I'll move on.
It'd be very costly.
Does anyone want to speak to that?
No.
We're good? Okay, we're good.
Glad to see that.
Okay, and this is the last comment, mercifully. When we came up in to do the audit, it was noted that there were two adjusting entries from the prior year, and they were probably late adjustments, you know, at the tail end of the audit, this happens, that hadn't been posted on the town's book, so it took some effort to reconcile beginning fund balance because there were those two items that hadn't been posted. And there was, one was accrued receivables on the River Trail project of about $268,000, and the other was the entry for the healthcare liability, which was $66,000. So those just needed to be posted as part of the, in order to begin this year's audit.
Thank you for minimizing the posting to routine. However, I do want to point out that these two postings were fairly critical. The more critical one being the accrued expense for the health insurance, the self-insurance fund. I couldn't believe when I got here that the town was self-insured. I couldn't believe that there was no liability to carry over. I think when Diane and I were looking at this, the reserve that was required at the end of this last fiscal year in order to carry the plan forward would have been, the numbers would have been exponential on that 66,000. So it was a significant miss.
So that's it for the management letter, and I know that may seem extensive, but I think it's partly a function of you know, new town manager and finance director and new auditors. Sometimes gives a new set of eyes, and as we have to train ourselves and we have to be trained as your new auditors, we're looking at a lot more things because we've got to learn in depth the operations of the town and school. And we do feel it's important to put those things in writing so that they can be known by everyone. And obviously management agreed with us in that. You know, these are things that can be communicated just, you know, in a sit-down with management, but everyone felt strongly that they should be communicated in writing. I do want to mention just briefly, too, that this document that you received tonight, your federal compliance audit, including your financial statements and compliance reports, is a little thicker than what you're used to in the past. And that's for a couple of reasons. One reason is that our firm rolls everything into the same document, so we include your compliance reports, including your reconciliation of MEDMs on the school side to the state, which is required as part of the audit. So basically, essentially anything that's required by the audit gets into one document. So that's one reason. The second reason, more importantly, is that you've gone a long way, Ed has gone a long way towards preparing a comprehensive annual financial report. What that is a financial report that goes beyond the requirements of just your annual financial statement, which is required for every municipality by law. But this comprehensive annual financial report includes things like an introductory section, a transmittal letter to transmit the financial statements to the readers, and the more cumbersome piece of that is the statistical tables in the back. So it includes a lot of 10-year trend information, and includes demographic information about the town. It includes debt debt coverage information about the town. And in my opinion, it provides a lot of wonderful information that other towns don't have in their financial statements. It's a lot of work in the first year, and if you look at some of those tables right at the back of the financial statements, you'll see how much work might be entailed. It's a lot of tracking down information from 10 years ago that isn't the easiest to get. What you do with that report, you can just prepare a comprehensive annual financial report and have it go to your elected officials and other users of your financial statements. But the other thing you can do with that is submit it to the Government Finance Officers Association for their review, and if it meets their standards, which are very high, especially for first-year entrance into it. Alan knows about this because the city of Lewiston has...
Because I do their stats.
has right, and you know how much work.
Yeah.
Would you agree that it's a lot of work?
No, that was my comment. Was my comment to Ed? Is the fact is seeing the contribution to getting in that format is huge for the community.
Yeah. And I think the intention is to submit this for the award in a future year, whether it be 2016 or 17. You've gone a long ways already, and if it meets their standards, you receive a certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting, which is the highest award given in governmental financial reporting. And there's only, Alan may know the answer to this better than I do. I would say 12 to 15 in the state of Maine.
My employer. That's
Yeah.
the only
Lewiston was one of the first, and a lot of people copied them, but there's only about 12 to 15 in the state of Maine, and for accounting geeks like me, it's a huge deal, but, and I think it would be, be a feather in the cap for the town to pursue that award. So I commend you for those efforts as well. One other reason that this is a little thicker are some new accounting standards that I could bore you to death with, but I won't. And they're the new pension standards that had to be implemented this year, where you, in your case, since you're part of Maine PERS, you don't have a separate pension, the town's own pension fund. You've got to report your share of the pension deficit that Maine PERS has. It added about probably 6 or 7 pages to your financial statements in the footnotes. It's very cumbersome, in my opinion, difficult to understand for the average reader of financial statements, and me as well. They could have done it a lot better, but I won't get into that. And that doesn't impact your general fund or your general operations. It impacts what are known as the entity-wide statements, where all of the funds and activities, including long-term assets and liabilities like capital assets and your bonds payable, get rolled into a single financial statement. So it only impacts those, but for those of you familiar with financial statements, that will be new to you, and it includes about 4 or 5 pages in the footnotes, and then some required supplementary information. So that was something new this year that had to be done.
Prior standard was better and more informative.
Yep.
I just want to say thank you to Ed for all the work he's put into this document. It's a very good document this year. There's a lot more detail than in prior years, and Ed's put a lot of time and effort into it. And I also want to say that Haley was really responsible for getting a lot of the tax collections in prior year, because she worked really close with me. She was the one who was dealing with all the tax acquired people, and as you know, we had 55 of them on the books when we started in January of last year, and now we have 6 on the books.
So I'll add my 2 cents as far as the audit itself. The people on the school side and the town side, everyone was very cooperative. The audit is later than any of us would like. Part of it being the pension standards. It was mostly on our end, the bottleneck that created. But as far as the audit itself, everyone was cooperative and responsive, and the audit itself went very well. And I think So I'm gonna get you information on the cash accounts using the town's ID number, some comparative fund balance information, and some fund balance percentages. So sorry for not having that tonight, but I'll get that to you. If there are any questions or comments or discussions,
You also said that you would be available to work with us and I'm assuming the water department and the other general government departments about the whole account
Yeah.
reconciliations?
Yep, and I've already had discussions with Haley about the general ledger cleanup, and I sent her the entries
I've
that
been
we
wondering, I had
proposed.
questions about that too, because we've had grants and stuff that have, we spent the money and they're still sitting there.
Yeah, absolutely, we'll work together and get all that stuff cleaned up.
Any other questions?
I just have a general comment. The fact is, I like this. It's a critical assessment of where we are. The fact is, I appreciate with both new management coming in and a new auditor, having this as an opportunity for improvement. In that regard, taking a huge step forward in our financials, it also helps with basis for planning. So, thank you both. Everybody. I mean,
Yeah.
our business partners too. I mean, the fact is, in that regard, it's one basket of good, folks.
There's been a lot of change here in Lisbon.
For the good.
over the last, and it has been for the good, and we got a new town manager, new finance director doing a wonderful job, and they had a lot of stuff to clean up, so, they're going the right direction. It was nice to see Ed agreed with everything on your notes there, and Ed's done a wonderful job. It's been doing good, so, we appreciate what you did.
Yep.
Any other questions? We, for the sake of time, because they gotta clean this room up for the, planning board meeting, we're not gonna be able to open it up for any comments or questions from the audience, so. I have a motion to adjourn.
Done.
Second?
Made it.
Ward and Albert.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Did I talk too long, Eric?
They're gonna use the tables the way they are.
Good.
So we're good, yep.
You did good.
Read my
Thank
mind,
you.
I was just gonna ask the same question. I figured they were gonna use it, but I didn't know at this level or not.
Yeah, they have a workshop.
I did highlight it.